You know, what's funny is I trained for my first ultramarathon while starting a PhD and launching a business. And to, you know, for any one of those things, those are big, hairy, scary, bold goals for anyone to take on, let alone out at once. And for me, when I started running ultramarathons, a big part of that is that I felt like I was mentally weak and I wasn't strong and I wasn't capable. And I was trying to train myself to be someone who did hard things and didn't struggle so much or find things so difficult. And the irony of that was that throughout the process of doing that, it just showed me that I am and have always been the person who is capable of doing hard things. And sometimes you just have to put yourself in the environment to test that. Mixed with, it's so funny, I've always been someone so filled with just such extreme self-doubt, but so hardworking and always chasing things at the highest effort of which I can do them and pushing myself as hard as I can to prove that almost to myself along the way. And so I entered that phase of ultra running and training with the same self-doubt I brought into grad school and my business. And throughout the years, all of those have evolved together to really show me the person that I am, and that I am the person who does hard things and that is capable of doing hard things. And pushing myself allows me to always find those edges and those creases of who I am as a person. And every time I thought that I'd reach a point that would break me, it only showed me more of who I was. And there's something really powerful about taking yourself to your own personal limit, whether that's professionally or personally or physically, and seeing, you know, exactly what you're made of and or how you handle breaking at the end of the day. So what's funny is when I think about who I am inherently as a person, I have these two versions, the very confident, excited, life-chasing 15-year-old running on my back roads of my hometown version of myself who's dreaming really big and believes that she's truly made for great things and she can do difficult things. And then I have the girl crying in the parking lot before the first day of my master's thinking, you know, they made a mistake, I'm not capable of doing this. Or the girl, you know, throwing up at the starting line of an ultra because she feels like there's no way that she could possibly do what she's about to do. And through the process of ultra running specifically, I've pushed myself to edges where when I'm in the depths of these races and in the woods and I'm faced with, you know, these really low lows or these really difficult moments, I'm able to meet a different version of myself. And I've had these distinct moments in some of my first races. So my first 50 miler, you know, I was so scared to get this point that was about 10 miles out, known as the Rock Garden. And I was spending the whole day trying to get there by sunset so I didn't trip over the rocks. And I was so worried about failing in this moment of this last bit. And what's funny is I remember distinctly that last 10 miles of that race being some of the most transformative miles of my entire life. Instead of getting there late, in the dark, getting lost, tripping, I got there early in the sun and the rocks weren't that bad. And I was actually strong and capable and ran really hard those last 10 miles. And there was something about meeting that version of myself there that I feel like shattered and changed my entire perception of myself as a human in that moment. And it was just 10 miles of me. And I was like shedding the layers like a snake of that self-doubt and all of those things. And I just came off this really hard season of life where my grandmother passed and I almost didn't run the race because I felt like even though I trained so hard, I didn't trust the training and I didn't think that I was ready. And I did it and it showed me exactly the kind of person who I was, and I needed to see that. And then when I did my first 100K, that following year, I thought, okay, well, this is the race that will break me. This is the moment that it will break me. And that was funny because I never had a moment in that race where I broke. It was hard, I was cold, I was tired, it challenged me immensely. But there wasn't a moment where I felt like, oh, this is where I'm going to break. It was instead, I found out that I am exactly who I say I am and view who I am in the depths of that race. And it was, you know, funny to watch that parallel from year to year of me just discovering who I was and then questioning, well, is that really who I am? And then going into a bigger, you know, scarier goal and realizing, no, you are exactly who you think you are, but finding that out there when you're pushing those edges and it's dark and it's the middle of the night and you're pushing so hard, and to cross those finish lines and know the journey that you've went through. And it, you know, they say that an ultra marathon is not just a day, it's an entire lifetime, and you learn so much of yourself out there. But for me, it's been so powerful to do the things that are really, really, really hard and to find out through those things that it was never those things that made you strong and capable and able to do really difficult stuff. It's that you have always been the type of person who has done that. You just needed the thing that pushed you to discover that limit. I think the process of training for ultramarathons or getting a PhD or starting a business is you have to have so much trust in the process and yourself and your own abilities or your own ideas or, doing the work that is required of you. I think so many people feel like they can't do these big, scary, bold goals, things that are very difficult. And the reality is it's the work that teaches you more about yourself and allows you to learn how to trust yourself and trust what you're doing in order to achieve that thing. It was never, saying, oh, I'm gonna get my PhD and starting it on day one that let me walk across that stage. It was every single step and rep in between. Same with every race that I've trained for. I had to train intelligently and trust myself to show up and do that work and be the type of person who shows up for their goals and keeps promises to themselves and trust that they will do the work to do the thing that they want to do. And I think that so many people focus on just that end goal. But for me, learning to focus on the process and being the type of person who loves the process, who does the work, who says that she will, who does the things that she says she's going to do and executes them as well as she can, has taught me a lot about trusting myself and then believing in myself because I can rely on me and I can count on me to show up for those things. So I know that when I get into these races or these moments in, professional or personal lives when things get really hard, I know that I'm the type of person who will do the work or figure out how to get through that. And I've learned that type of, trust in these characteristics of myself through doing the work over time and being smart and respecting the process and the execution and actually having the respect for my goals to do the things that are required to get there in a way that allows me to actually achieve them. I think people inherently make the mistake that if their goal makes them nervous or they doubt it or they don't feel like they can do it or execute it, that means they've already failed at it or they're not capable of it. And I think it's important to remember that big goals, scary goals, hard goals, they're supposed to give you that scary, bone-chilling, terrified feeling, and you're supposed to doubt if you can do them because you've never done them. You don't know if you can do something until you've done it, and it's not a fatal flaw with you. That doesn't mean you're not capable because you don't trust that you can do the thing, whether that's your first 5K, your first mile, your first ultra, joining a gym, getting in shape, the graduate degree, starting the business. You don't know that you can do the thing until you do the thing, but you have to start to do that. And you have to lean into that discomfort of doing the hard thing in order to actually start to build the self-efficacy of knowing that you are the person who can do those things, but you are not flawed or broken or incapable because you doubt or you're unsure or you're nervous about goals. Any good goal that you set should scare you. It should terrify you. It should make you nervous to actually execute and do. That means that you're setting things outside your comfort zone and you will grow from that and that you are doing the right thing. If your goals don't scare you, then you're probably not either setting them big enough or you're not going to take the time to really respect and commit to the process of what it takes to get there because it's going to be within the wheelhouse of everything that you're already doing. So knowing that being nervous or scared or uncertain is often a good thing, even if it feels like the bad thing in the process of doing it. So people often ask me, what do you have a mantra? What do you think of, or how do you, hang on, go around the tree, to the left. What do you think of and how do you get through when it gets really hard or you don't know if you can keep going? And something that I've often repeated to myself during the middle of races is you can do anything for a minute, right? And that seems so silly, but if you string up enough minutes together, you make miles. And if you make enough miles, you get to the end goal. And you can apply the same thing to anything that you're doing in life, but I'll have these little mantras of that, of like, you can do anything for a minute, and remind myself that I don't need to think about 5, 10, 20 minutes ahead. I just need to think about the minute and the moment and the mile that I'm in. And that helps me break things down to smaller chunks. I'm not trying to run, you don't run 100 miles by, suddenly starting and then being there at the finish line. You take it mile by mile at the time. And so reminding myself to focus on the work that's in front of me, I think that's holds true for anything in life. And we have moments where you're gonna doubt yourself or if you can actually execute the thing that you're trying to do. But if you focus on executing it in small micro bites, it's a lot easier. Down tree. When it comes to training for these events and these races, or even completing my PhD, running my business, there's gonna be days where the work is just the work and it sucks and it's not a good training session. And I think we have these unfair expectations that every training session has to be the best training session, or that the reflection of our fitness in any given day is the single training session that we're doing. And something that has been helpful is leaning into the process of doing these things and focusing more on the process as a whole than these individual days as a reflection of the outcome of what I'm trying to achieve. And doing the work when I'm bored, I am not motivated, it's really hard, has allowed me to then kind of lean into that even in my own life when I don't want to do the hard thing or show up for the thing that is boring, or the unsexy work, as we like to say. And something that's come from that as well is, I think, especially training for these really long, hard events, is that I've reframed the days where it's sucky, it's a terrible training session, the weather's horrible, I'm unmotivated, it's just whatever, it's too cold, whatever. And I think, okay, good, because you're gonna be tired on race day, you're gonna be fatigued on race day, you're going to be cold or hot, something is going to go wrong. And by doing these things that are kind of shitty in the moment, allows me to practice that, so when I actually execute it on race day, I've already prepared for that. And I think there's something very cliche to be said about doing hard things in your life, training you to be more resilient, to do hard things outside of the gym or off the trail or off the road or all those other things. I truly believe that the reason I'm able to push as hard as I do in my career, academically or professionally or personally, is because I've put myself in these situations to practice doing the hard and uncomfortable things and learning a lot about myself in the process. So when I need to apply that to different situations, I already know that I can trust myself, or that it's gonna be okay, or I can do the difficult thing or the thing that I don't wanna do in the moment and still move forward with the project or whatever is going on, the same way that you can with any given training session. But all that to say, I think a lot of people, they need to stop unfairly judging themselves for any one bad training session or day. We are the accumulation of all of those good and bad days together, and that's what actually makes the outcome of what you get when you toe the line of that race or event or whatever you're training for. I think with continuously testing and pushing my limits, I always grew up an athlete, I was always running, I was always someone who wanted to see what it felt like to push. I like that. I think anyone who has an athletic background feels that way. But being an exercise scientist, I'm fascinated with the limits of human capacity and what we're capable of. And I think for most of us, we're never going to be elite athletes. We're never going to meet these true human limitations. But that doesn't mean that we don't have our own limits. And for me, it's been really exciting and fun to try to find the edges of my own fitness and my own physiology, whether that's coming from, how heavy can I lift and deadlifting 400 pounds, all the way to running ultramarathons, to getting a terminal degree or doing whatever the metaphorical hard thing. I think, these aren't the only ways to do hard things in our lives. There's so many different avenues for so many different people, or what that looks like for them. Hard is relative to each and every one of us. No one has to run an ultramarathon to do something hard or difficult. But it's been really exciting for me to push, especially in fitness, to see what I'm physically and mentally capable of, and trying to find those limits. And what I think that so many people don't realize is that we have this idea of where a limit is and where we're going to break, or where we're not going to be able to do anything more. And what I've found in fitness is you surprise yourself, because your limit is a lot further out than what you actually think it is, which I think is really cool and empowering to see. And just with every limit that you push forward and out, you expand to that almost as a person too, which is just fun. And honestly, I just want to know what I'm made of and capable of. Why not? I only get one body and one life, and I might as well use it up and see what it can do. And I'd rather look back and know I had a life well lived, where I wrung every drop out of my body and what it can do. And so there's a little bit of that always, of I want to use up every little bit of this while I have it, and celebrate it and use it and see what it actually can do. And I don't want to regret not doing that. I think something that's really hard for all people, and it was for me too, was to be so filled with so much self-doubt and not knowing if you could truly trust yourself to do those things, or that you were capable of, and not really thinking that you deserve to be able to do these things, or that you were actually someone who was able to accomplish those things. And I was so filled with self-doubt for so many years, and it really defined a lot of everything that I did in my my early 20s. And it's funny, as I feel like so much of my growth with training and everything that I've done has just been me just ignoring that voice and choosing to do those things anyway, and recognizing that I was scared and I did doubt it and I wasn't sure if I could do it, but I had to acknowledge that voice and be okay with it being there, but I didn't have to listen to it. Like, those were just thoughts, and I got to redefine, or I got to go out there and decide who I was and what I actually was. And there was these pivotal moments, I think, that time deep into my first 50 miler, or when I did, I passed my comps during my PhD and or different milestones and stuff, where I realized that the only person out there that was questioning if I could do any of the things that I wanted to do or said I was gonna do or set out to do was only me. And I just reached a point where one day I was just sick of not being on my own side and sick of not believing in myself. And I think it took a lot of really putting myself out there and recognizing that that was a narrative that I put on myself that no one else was putting on me. And I got to decide who I actually was and who I believed that I got to be. And that was really transformative. And I don't think I would have reached that point if I didn't intentionally, ignore that voice and do those things anyway, because through training for the ultras and pushing my body and pushing myself, I've been able to actually learn who I actually am and realize that I am someone who believes deeply that they are capable of doing things, or that they can do hard things too.